I think the Gospel of John is the best loved of the Gospels. It's the one that has the widest appeal to a very broad range of the public. In terms of the sheer force of the narrative action, the Gospel of John is the one that speaks most loudly and clearly. The Jesus of the Gospel of John is just a little different from the Jesus of the other Gospels. And in the Gospel of John, he has something of a more human, intimate kind of feel to him.
Your brother will rise to life.
I know that he will rise to life on the last day.
He's there in conversation with people over a longer period of time. And that seems to me to establish a kind of intimacy between him and the other characters, where you get the impression that Jesus was really interested in this person. And there's a kind of exploration of character that I think is quite powerful.
Do you believe this?
Yes, Lord. I do believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world.
John represents Jesus in his deity. And I think Christians have responded to that because he presents him most clearly as Son of God with the Father before he came into the world. And as in ancient Israel, they identified God not in a philosophical sense of what is the substance of God. They were more concerned about the identity of God. Who created all things? Who is the ruler of all things? And Jesus appears on the scene, and he shows himself to be the creator of all things.
Whoever believes in me, believes not only in me, but also in him who sent me. Whoever sees me, sees also him who sent me. I have come into the world as light, so that everyone who believes in me should not remain in the darkness.
Basically, Jesus is a revealer figure. And when you see Jesus, you see God. He mediates to us what God is like, at least according to the author of the Gospel of John.
Do not work for food that spoils. Instead, work for the food that lasts for eternal life.
This is the food which the Son of Man will give you, because God the Father has put his mark of approval on him.
The way John describes Jesus is in such a way that people can relate to what he has to say about eternal life. No one likes to think of themselves as just all of a sudden disappearing. And John, more so than any of the other Gospels, holds out the hope of eternal life to every believer.
The time is coming when all the dead will hear his voice and come out of their graves. Those who have done good will rise and live. And those who have done evil will rise and be condemned.
Jesus confronted Jewish life in a number of ways. He first of all confronted Jews politically. He had a political message. And when we see Jesus overturning the money changers in the temple, that's not a simple religious act. It's also a political act.
Stop making my Father's house a marketplace!
The temple was both the seat of religious activity and also of government. So to have done that was a confrontational action on his part.
What miracle can you perform to show us that you have the right to do this?
Tear down this temple, and in 3 days I will build it again.
One of the things to remember about early Christianity is it's a family squabble. Everyone participating in the squabble is trying to interpret Judaism for their time. In the temple, you had a sacrificial system that was set and had years of tradition. In the synagogue, you had a teaching focused on text, also with a lot of tradition.
The bread that I will give you is my flesh, which I give so that the world may live. No! How can this man give us his flesh to eat? I am telling you the truth.
Now you get with this Jesus character a new sort of variation on the synagogue model. And so it is that sort of family squabble.
You study the scriptures because you think that in them you will find eternal life. And these very scriptures speak about me, yet you are not willing to come to me in order to have life.
We see Jesus confronting the Pharisees over their interpretations of the law. They were very clever and very learned, and as I understand Jesus' critique, it was that they were too clever and wound up in their cleverness ignoring the main sense of what the law was there to ensure.
If a boy is circumcised on the Sabbath so that Moses' law is not broken, why are you angry with me? Because I made a man completely well on the Sabbath. Stop judging by external standards and judge by true standards.
So he was a very provocative and confrontational person in his society, a person whom a lot of people would have called a troublemaker. And of course that's exactly what we find attractive about him as a figure. He says how truthful he is several times in the gospel, and I think we should take that to be one of his great virtues and one of his greatest faults.
Do you really know me? And know where I am from?
What the early church was convinced was that this Jesus that they saw, who was a teacher, rabbi, miracle worker, healer, compassionate person, died on a cross, and they believed was risen from the dead by the power of God. They said, this person is the expected Messiah. This is the one that the Jewish people have been expecting for hundreds of years. Now, that's the place where the Jewish groups at the time differed from the early church. And in a sense, it was that distinction. Is Jesus or not is Jesus the expected Messiah?